She said I could never afford a woman like her. 2 years later, I bought the company that fired me for her husband. That's not just revenge. That's balance. Before I tell you how it happened, make sure you subscribe, like, and leave a comment, because this one's about losing everything and coming back for more than just payback. It started like most stories do. Ordinary, quiet, nothing special. I was 35, working a regular job at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago. Nothing flashy, nothing glamorous, but stable. I handled client accounts, spent most of my time behind a screen, crunching numbers, sending reports. I wasn't rich, but I was steady. My wife, Amanda, liked the comfort at first. The dinners out once in a while, the vacations we could afford every couple of years. But over time, I started noticing the small changes. The sighs when I'd talk about work, the way she'd roll her eyes when I said, maybe next year. She'd dress up more when she went out with friends. Stay out later, check her phone with that guarded look people get when they've already mentally left a relationship. I wanted to believe it was just a phase. Every couple goes through rough patches, right? Then one night, at a dinner party with some of her friends, it happened. We were sitting around a polished oak table, wine glasses clinking, laughter filling the air. Amanda was radiant. She always was when there were people watching. One of her friends, a woman named Lisa, asked her how we met. Before I could even open my mouth, Amanda smirked and said, he was just this sweet guy from work. He couldn't really afford me, but I figured I'd give him a chance. The table erupted in laughter. My face went hot. I tried to laugh it off, but the sting was real. She noticed. She leaned in close to me, pretending to whisper something affectionate, but instead she said quietly, "Don't take it so seriously, Mark. I mean, let's be honest. It's not entirely untrue." That night, when we got home, I tried to talk to her about it. I told her it embarrassed me, that it wasn't funny. She poured herself a glass of wine, looked at me like I was a child, and said, "You're too sensitive. You should be grateful, Mark. Women like me don't usually marry men like you." I remember standing there in silence, feeling something inside me crack. That was the night I realized I was living with someone who didn't respect me, someone who didn't even see me. A month later, I lost my job. The company was restructuring, and I was one of the cost-cutting measures. I came home that evening, holding the box with my things, a photo frame, some books, a coffee mug Amanda had given me once with "World's Best Husband" printed on it. She saw me, saw the box, and just stared. "You're kidding," she said. "You actually lost your job." I nodded. Her expression turned from disbelief to irritation. "I can't live like this, Mark. You promised stability. I can't be married to a man who doesn't know how to win." I told her I'd figure something out, that it was temporary. She just shook her head and said the words I'll never forget. "You'll never be able to afford a woman like me." I should have known better. She packed her things 2 days later. No tears, no goodbye. Just slammed the door and drove off in the car that, ironically, I was still making payments on. I didn't chase her. I didn't beg. I just stood in that empty apartment, surrounded by silence, and made a promise to myself. If she thought I couldn't afford her, I'd build something so big, so undeniable, that no one could ever say that to me again. Not her, not anyone. Those first few months were hell. I was broke, angry, and sleepless. I worked temporary gigs, freelanced, and poured everything I earned into one crazy idea I'd been nursing for years, a small business analytics platform that could help companies manage their resources better. It wasn't glamorous, and everyone told me I was wasting my time, but I didn't care. I'd lost everything already. What more could I lose? I coded through the nights, worked shifts during the day, lived on takeout and caffeine. There were days I thought about giving up, about calling Amanda and admitting she was right. But every time I heard her voice in my head, "You'll never be able to afford a woman like me," it became fuel. A year in, something shifted. A local investor I'd met at a networking event liked what I was building. He took a chance on me, gave me enough seed money to scale the idea. That was the start. My little startup, the one everyone laughed at, began to grow. Slowly at first, a few clients, then more. We moved into a small office, hired a team. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I wasn't just chasing success. I was rebuilding my soul. And then one morning, while reviewing a list of potential acquisition targets, I froze. The name of my old company was there, the same one that fired me. The same one where Amanda's new husband Ryan worked as a senior manager. I looked at that name for a long time, a smile slowly spreading across my face. It wasn't revenge I felt. Not yet. It was something colder, a sense of balance finally forming in the universe. I leaned back in my chair, stared at that list, and thought, this is where the story begins to turn. When I saw the name of that company, everything inside me went quiet. It wasn't rage or even excitement. It was something deeper, colder, more precise. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm. I remember sitting in my office, the morning light spilling through the blinds, my coffee gone cold, and thinking, what if I could actually pull this off? The idea of buying that company wasn't just about business. It was about rewriting a story that had started with humiliation and ended with loss. But this time, I wanted control over every chapter, so I didn't rush. I planned. My company had been doing well. We doubled our client base, landed a few major contracts, and had investors knocking at our door. But to buy out an entire firm like that, I'd need more capital, more leverage, and a reputation solid enough to make it possible. I spent the next 6 months building exactly that. I turned down smaller offers, consolidated assets, and formed partnerships with 2 major investors who believed in what I was doing. I worked around the clock again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Every decision, every email, every late-night meeting was a step closer to that moment. My team didn't know the personal motivation behind it. To them, it was just business expansion. To me, it was poetic justice in progress. One night, I came across a social media post that stopped me in my tracks. It was Amanda. She was smiling, standing next to her new husband, Ryan, the man she'd left me for. The caption read, "Proud of my husband's promotion. Hard work pays off." I almost laughed. Ryan's promotion was at the same company that once fired me, the same one I was now preparing to acquire. The irony was so sharp it almost hurt. I stared at that picture for a long time. She looked different. Still beautiful, yes, but there was something in her smile that seemed forced, rehearsed. I realized I didn't feel the same bitterness anymore, just determination. I didn't want her back. I didn't want to prove her wrong for her sake. I wanted to prove to myself that I could build something no one could take away again. By the end of that year, I was sitting in a meeting with a board of directors, the same board that had once voted to let me go. Only this time, I was on the other side of the table. My company had made an offer to buy them out. The numbers were strong, the valuation solid, and the timing perfect. They were struggling with debt, management turnover, and a loss of investor confidence. My acquisition proposal was exactly what they needed. I remember watching the executives whisper among themselves, their eyes darting toward me, trying to place where they'd seen me before. When the CEO finally realized, his expression shifted. He remembered. "You worked for us, didn't you?" he said, his voice uncertain. I smiled and nodded. "Yes," I said. "A long time ago." The deal took weeks to finalize, but when it did, the moment was surreal. My company now owned the very place that had once discarded me like I was nothing. I walked through the building on my first day as owner. The same corridors, the same offices, the same smell of burnt coffee and printer ink. But everything felt different. People greeted me politely, unaware of the history that lingered in those walls. I stopped outside one office door and saw a familiar name on the plaque, Ryan Miller, Senior Operations Manager. I stood there for a few seconds, then smiled faintly and moved on. Not yet, I thought. A few weeks later, I called for an all-staff meeting. It was routine. I introduced myself as the new owner, thanked everyone for their work, talked about the direction the company was heading. It was all very professional, but as I spoke, I noticed her, Amanda. She was standing near the back of the room, holding a stack of papers, her expression frozen. She was there visiting her husband, probably waiting for him to finish work. Her eyes widened the second she realized who was speaking. For a brief moment, I saw the color drain from her face. I didn't acknowledge her then. I finished the meeting, thanked everyone again, and walked past her without a word. I could feel her gaze burning into me, but I didn't turn around. That evening, after everyone had left, I was in my office reviewing paperwork when there was a knock at the door. I didn't look up. "Come in," I said, and there she was. Amanda standing in the doorway, clutching her bag like it was a shield. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she spoke, her voice smaller than I remembered. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know this was your company. I looked up at her and smiled, calm and steady. "No," I said. "You didn't." She hesitated, trying to find her footing. "You've done well," she said quietly. I nodded. "I have." There was silence again. She took a small step closer, her eyes searching mine for something. Maybe regret, maybe pride. But all she saw was peace. She looked down, her voice trembling. "I shouldn't have said what I did back then." I leaned back in my chair, watching her carefully. "You said what you believed," I replied, "that I could never afford someone like you." She flinched, as if hearing her own words out loud after all those years hurt more than she expected. "I was wrong," she whispered. I smiled faintly and said, "Yes, you were." But that wasn't the end of it, because what happened next made even that moment look small in comparison. The universe had one more twist waiting, one she never saw coming. The day after our brief conversation, I couldn't shake the image of Amanda's face as she stood in my office. She looked lost, uncertain, almost fragile. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to face her again, to see her reaction when she realized what I had become. I thought it would feel like victory, that I would walk away satisfied, triumphant. But the truth was different. What I felt wasn't triumph. It was closure. It was quiet. Still, life had a strange sense of irony, and I was about to see just how far that irony could go. A few weeks after that meeting, the company's HR department informed me that Ryan's division had been underperforming. He was managing one of the key operational branches, and the reports were clear: declining productivity, missed deadlines, poor morale. Normally, I would have left it to the department heads to handle, but this was different. The situation called for a direct review. I requested a performance meeting with all department heads, including Ryan. When he walked into the conference room, he didn't recognize me at first. He shook my hand politely, introduced himself, and sat down across from me. It wasn't until I began speaking that I saw the recognition flash in his eyes. His posture stiffened slightly, his confident smile faltering. He glanced down at the nameplate on the table, reading my name again as if trying to convince himself it was real. "Mark," he said slowly, You used to work here, didn't you?" I smiled. "Yes, I did. Until I didn't." The meeting was formal, strictly business, but there was an unspoken tension that filled the room. Every time I spoke, Ryan's discomfort grew. Every time he presented an excuse for his department's performance, I countered it with data, calm and precise. The other managers watched quietly, sensing there was more beneath the surface, but not daring to interrupt. When the meeting ended, I dismissed everyone except him. He lingered in his seat, uneasy. I leaned forward slightly and said, "You're smart, Ryan. Ambitious. But I expect better results. You've got 3 months to turn things around." He nodded, avoiding eye contact, muttering something about making improvements. As he stood to leave, I added, "Oh, and tell Amanda I said hello." He froze for a moment before walking out without another word. Over the next few weeks, I focused on expanding the company's reach. We secured new contracts, upgraded our systems, and restructured departments that had been stagnant for years. Meanwhile, I kept hearing small pieces of gossip floating through the office about how Ryan was struggling, how tensions at home were growing. It wasn't my intention to interfere in his personal life, but it was clear that the pressure was eating away at him. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw Amanda waiting outside the building. She looked different again, tired, anxious. When she saw me, she straightened her posture and gave a faint smile. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. We walked to a small cafe down the street, one of those quiet places with warm lighting and the faint smell of roasted coffee beans. She started talking before we even sat down. "Ryan's been distant," she said softly. "He's under a lot of pressure at work. I didn't realize you were the one in charge now." I stirred my coffee and said nothing. She looked at me, her eyes glassy. "He's not like you," she said finally. "You were always steady. You never gave up, even when things were hard. I didn't see it then." I looked up at her, and for the first time in years, I saw the truth in her expression: regret. Not the shallow kind people feel when they get caught in their mistakes, but the deep, lingering kind that grows quietly over time. "Amanda," I said calmly, "you made your choice. You told me I couldn't afford someone like you. Maybe you were right then, but you were measuring worth by the wrong scale." She lowered her eyes, tracing her finger along the edge of the cup. "You changed," she whispered. I smiled faintly. No, I said. I just stopped trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't see it. The silence between us was heavy, filled with everything we'd never said when we were together. After a moment, she spoke again. Ryan doesn't know how to handle this, she admitted. He's scared you're going to fire him. I leaned back and folded my arms. Should he be? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at me, her eyes searching for the man she once knew. But that man was gone. She left him behind years ago when she walked out the door. Now she was staring at someone she couldn't recognize, someone she'd helped create, though she didn't know it then. A few weeks later, Ryan made a crucial mistake. A major client pulled out of a contract due to poor communication and missed deliverables from his department. It cost the company a significant amount of money. The board demanded a response, and as CEO, the responsibility to act fell on me. I called Ryan into my office. He looked nervous, his tie slightly loosened, his face pale. I laid out the facts, the reports, the losses, the client's statement. He tried to explain, to shift blame, but it was no use. Ryan, I said quietly, I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to lose everything. But the difference between us is I didn't make excuses. His eyes flickered with anger, then shame. I continued, You're being released from your position effective immediately. HR will handle the details. He stood there in stunned silence, his lips tightening as he fought to hold back whatever he wanted to say. Then he left. That evening, as I was getting ready to leave the office, I saw Amanda again, this time waiting by the elevator. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling slightly. You fired him, she said quietly. I nodded. It was a business decision. She shook her head. You knew what it would do to us. I met her gaze and said, Now you know how it feels to lose something you thought you'd never lose. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing slowly between us, her reflection fading in the polished metal until it was gone. For the first time in years, I felt a strange peace, not from revenge, but from release. I didn't need her to see me as successful. I just needed to see that I'd moved beyond her. But I had no idea that the next time I'd see Amanda, it wouldn't be in an office or a cafe. It would be somewhere completely unexpected where the final piece of this story would fall into place. It was about 6 months after that day in the elevator when I saw Amanda again. I hadn't thought about her much since then. Life had moved on. The company was thriving, my team was expanding, and I was traveling more than ever. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing I had built something out of ashes, something that no one could take from me this time. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was simply living. One evening, I was attending a charity gala downtown. It was one of those high-profile events where the city's most influential business owners and investors gathered under crystal chandeliers, exchanging smiles that never quite reached their eyes. I had been invited as one of the major sponsors. I was walking through the crowd, shaking hands, talking business, when I heard a voice behind me, soft, familiar, uncertain. Mark? I turned, and there she was. Amanda. She looked different, not in a way that time alone could explain. The sharp confidence she once carried like armor was gone. Her dress was elegant, but modest, her hair pulled back simply. There were faint lines around her eyes, the kind that come not just from age, but from disappointment. She gave a hesitant smile. I wasn't sure if that was really you, she said. I nodded slightly. It's me. For a moment, she seemed unsure of what to say. I could see her eyes scanning the room, taking in the people I was speaking with, the attention I was getting, the quiet respect that followed me now. It was the same kind of environment she used to crave. You look, she began, pausing as if the words themselves were difficult. You look incredible, successful, different. I smiled faintly. You look the same, I said, though we both knew it wasn't true. Her expression softened, almost sad. I've heard about you, she said quietly. Everyone has. You've built something amazing. I thanked her politely, keeping my tone calm, measured. She hesitated, then took a small step closer. Ryan and we're not together anymore, she admitted. Things fell apart after he lost that job. He couldn't handle it. He blamed me, blamed everything. I tried to make it work, but... Her voice trailed off, her eyes distant. Anyway, it's over. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. to feel that sense of satisfaction she had once stolen from me when she walked away. But I didn't. I just felt distant, detached, like I was listening to the story of a stranger. "I'm sorry it didn't work out," I said, my tone sincere. She looked at me, searching my face for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe pity. "Do you ever think about us?" she asked. About how things might have been different. I looked around the room, at the laughter, the soft music, the glow of the chandeliers reflecting off the glass walls. Then I looked back at her. "No," I said simply. "I used to, but not anymore." She seemed to flinch at that, as if my calmness hurt more than anger ever could. She tried to smile again, but her voice trembled. "I didn't mean what I said back then, you know. When I told you that you could never afford someone like me, I was scared. I wanted a life that felt secure, that looked perfect. I thought you weren't enough for that." I nodded slowly. "You were right about one thing," I said. "I couldn't afford you. Not because I didn't have enough money, but because you were too expensive in all the wrong ways." The words hung between us, quiet but sharp. She lowered her gaze, her hands tightening around the small clutch she carried. "You've changed," she whispered again. "You're colder." I smiled faintly. "No, just clearer." There was a pause long enough to feel the weight of every unsaid thing between us. Then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I miss what we had." I looked at her, not with anger or resentment, but with the clarity that comes only when the past has lost its hold. "What we had," I said softly, "was built on me trying to be enough for you. But real love isn't about proving worth. It's about recognizing it." She didn't respond. Her eyes shimmered under the lights, but she blinked away whatever emotion was rising. The host announced the next segment of the evening, an auction for charity, and the sound broke the silence between us. I excused myself politely and stepped away, leaving her standing there among the glittering crowd. As I moved through the rest of the night, people congratulated me, shook my hand, thanked me for my company's sponsorship. But my thoughts drifted, not to Amanda, but to the younger version of myself. The man who once believed love could fix what wasn't broken. The man who thought being quiet was the same as being weak. That man was gone, and in his place stood someone who had learned that sometimes silence is louder than shouting, that dignity outlasts revenge, and that self-worth doesn't need validation from anyone else. A few days later, I received a handwritten note delivered to my office. The handwriting was familiar, neat, deliberate. It was from Amanda. It read simply, "You were right. I was wrong. I hope someday I find the kind of peace you have. I'm happy for you." I placed the note in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. Life continued, and so did I. I expanded the business, took on new ventures, and found new people who didn't see me as lucky to have them, but as someone worth standing beside. Every once in a while, when I'd think back to those words she once said, "You'll never afford someone like me," I'd smile, not out of bitterness, but out of gratitude. Because sometimes the cruelest words are the ones that teach you exactly what you're capable of. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Success isn't about proving someone wrong, it's about proving yourself right. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever been told you weren't enough and then prove them wrong? Because sometimes the best revenge isn't saying a word. It's letting your silence speak for you.